On the morning of Sunday, January 8th, 1893, Hayes went to visit Lucy's grave in the local cemetery. That evening, he wrote in his diary of his longing to join her. At the Cleveland rail station a few days later, he experienced severe chest pains. "I would rather die at Spiegel Grove," he told onlookers, "than to live anywhere else." His wish was granted on the night of January 17th. President Grover Cleveland made the long train journey from Washington to attend his predecessor's funeral. "He was coming to see me," explained Cleveland, "but he is dead, and I will go to him." The gesture would have touched Hayes, for by his move, Cleveland buried all the old charges about the disputed election of 1876, along with the man who'd won it. His fraudulency, long since relegated to memory, was replaced by Hayes the reconciler. History repeated itself in our own time when Richard Nixon died and Bill Clinton delivered a eulogy at his funeral. It is only fair to judge a man in his own terms and in the context of his own times. Traditionally, historians assess leaders by what they finish while in office. Perhaps we should credit them as well for what they begin, often against great odds. It is proverbial that the first step of a long journey is the most difficult. Hayes set America on the road to political reform. In rising above the party system that produced him, he dispelled the fog of cynicism that periodically settles over the American political scene. Even further ahead of her times, Lucy Webb Hayes created her own platform, established her own credibility, won her own audience. Together, Lucy and Rudd speak to our age with surprising moral force. Not long before his death, Hayes observed to a friend that his marriage had been the most interesting fact of his life. It is a sentiment from which few historians would dissent. More than a century later, Rudd and Lucy, especially Lucy, remain the gold in the Gilded Age. Thank you very much. Questions, comments, observations?
Did Wyoming get in?
Wyoming did get in with its women. It was delayed, but it came in, I believe, in the 1890s. Yeah.
You mentioned the suggestion, I've heard it again since, about 1 6-year term. What would be your comment that the presidency?
I don't know. It's interesting. I've, in theory, I think it adds to a president's clout to hold the possibility over Congress and the rest of the political process that, you're not getting rid of me anytime soon. And beyond that, in theory, it seems to me that people should be able to vote for someone. I mean, I don't like the constitutional amendment that the Republicans rammed through over FDR's dead body, making sure that the president couldn't be elected to a third term. I think if you want to vote for someone for a third term, you should have that option. On the other hand, opposed to theory is practice. And the fact is, as we're all experiencing right now, second terms, as a rule, there are exceptions, but as a rule, second terms do not turn out very well. Few presidents leave office at the peak of their popularity. They're worn out, they're burned out, along with their White House staffs. And it's an intriguing idea. I'd like to see a debate, France has a 7-year presidency. General de Gaulle, when he created the Fifth Republic, instituted this. It was tailored to his personality, just as our Constitution was to General Washington's. And the French discovered, or concluded after a while, that 7 years is long, a little long. So they cut it to 5 years. But you can be reelected. I don't know. I'm not sure that 6 years, if you had, look, we're not going to have a parliamentary form of government. We have a presidential form of government. If you, rigidly lock in a term at 6 years and something goes disastrously awry, and you're stuck for 3 or 4 long, long years, I don't know. Yeah.
Obviously, Mary Lucy Hayes. Which of the president's first ladies do you personally
It's funny. I think I'll answer your question, but I'll preface it by saying I think they're all admirable in a number of ways, because these are women who, first of all, they never ran for anything. They weren't elected to anything. They're not paid anything. They are often subjected, for 200 years has been the case, to criticism for what they wear, or how their children conduct themselves, or what taste they have in interior decoration. I mean, or what causes they have, or if they don't have causes. It is in many ways, Margaret Truman said it was the second toughest job in America. And I think it's very tough. So I think every single one of these women, first of all, when you do research into the history of First Ladies, you'll discover the fact that many of them are more interesting than their husbands. More complex, because they haven't been distorted by politics. They're human beings, three-dimensional human beings. There's so many. Let me name a couple that you don't think about, because everyone knows about Eleanor and Lady Bird and certainly Mrs. Ford, but Lou Henry Hoover is virtually unknown. She's in Eleanor Roosevelt's shadow, but she was a remarkable woman, first woman to get a geology degree from Stanford. She spoke 5 languages. They had 2 children. He, of course, was a great mining engineer. They traveled the world. By the time Herbert Jr. was 5 years old, he'd been around the world 8 times. Lou didn't want to waste time on ocean liners. So first of all, she designed a cradle exclusively for use on ocean liners. And then she and her husband decided, rather than waste time, they'd put time to good use. And their idea of doing that was to translate the 16th century Latin scholar, mining scholar, Agricola. And she did most of the work. She was the linguist. At the time of Teapot Dome, her husband's in the war hiding cabinet, Lou convenes a conference specifically about what women can do to elevate the tone of politics and to pursue law enforcement and ethics in government. Remarkable woman, but again, almost totally forgotten today. If the Depression hadn't come along, she made history by inviting a black woman to the White House. It's hard to believe. Until 1929, no black woman had ever been socially welcomed to the White House. Mrs. Hoover did. It was Mrs. Oscar DePriest, the wife of a Chicago congressman. There were other women that day at the White House who would not shake her hand. And Lou went out of her way to spend the time with her. She apologized to her husband, not for what she did, but for the controversy that had arisen. And he said, "Don't worry, Lou, you did the right thing." And one of the consolations of Orthodox religion is the fact the Texas legislature had called for his impeachment. That's the preface to this. So he said one of the consolations of Orthodox religion is the fact that it provides a hot hell for the Texas legislature. But I would recommend, almost every First Lady is worth knowing more about than we do. They're all interesting and in many ways in a thankless position. Yeah.
Have you any personal feelings or convictions about electing a president using the Electoral College?
I do, and it's not a majority sentiment, but I think it goes to the nature of what kind of constitutional republic we are. I'm not a hidebound conservative, but in this particular case, I think the case is yet to be made for scrapping the Electoral College. There's an obvious, simple, overwhelming, apparent logic, which is it's democratic. But lest we forget, the Constitution did not create a pure democracy. It created a government both of individuals and of states. And the best evidence of that is, look at how the Congress is allocated. The fact is, you have 2 houses, and the compromise was the House of Representatives of, quote, People's House, is allocated on the basis of population. That would be consistent with getting rid of the Electoral College. But the Senate, every state has 2 votes, which is consistent with keeping the Electoral College.